Shen is back in a big way after his buff, Gwen is now in a terrible spot due to her nerfs, while Nidalee support is breaking into the meta. So we've got all this and much more to cover in today's video as we provide you guys with an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role. And it's no secret that League's ranking system is designed to trap you. It pulls you in with those games where everything clicks and you carry hard, only to balance it with frustrating matches that feel unwinnable from the start. This cycle keeps you grinding, hoping for change but never quite breaking through. What most players don't realize is that escaping this cycle requires specific skills and strategies tailored to your exact rank. That's where SkillCapped comes in. We're the only service in this industry that has invested millions of dollars into identifying what actually works at every tier. Our challenger coaches have mapped out the best and most useful strategies that turn hard-stuck players into consistent climbers, and you can access all this expertise for less than $9 a month with our annual plan. We're so confident in our method that our business model depends on your success. Climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped or claim a full refund. No questions asked. Stop wasting time on the ranked treadmill. Start climbing today with proven strategies designed specifically to break through your current rank. Check us out by clicking the link in the top right corner or in the description below. And with that being said, let's get into it. So we had moved Shen up into the S tier during the pre-patch tier list as we expected for his Q buff to be quite impactful, but it's landed even more powerful than anticipated, and he's being pushed into OP for mid-patch. It's actually not that much of a surprise though, because when we showed you guys the comparison clips for the Q buff, it's a substantial amount of damage added to Shen's Q, and it really adds up in an extended fight. Worth noting as well right now with Shen being back in a great spot is that his meta build has shifted in recent patches. It's no longer Heartsteel as the highest priority rush item on Shen, as Titanic Hydra has taken over. Heartsteel got nerfed a while back, and it just hasn't been very powerful ever since. With Titanic, it's actually a really nice rush for Shen, because the champ's main weakness is not having any strong wave clear tool in his kit, so getting that AoE splash damage from Titanic really helps him with his tempo in the mid game. Second item will be Deadman's Plate if you're up against a heavier physical damage comp, while you can grab Hollow Radiance into majority magic damage threats. What's working best for Shen's rune setup right now is not actually what's most popular, as Inspiration Secondary is heavily outperforming Domination Secondary. It's looking like the changes to Biscuits that we saw for this patch have been positive, so you're grabbing Biscuits with approach velocity in secondaries. These Gwen nerfs that Riot issued for 25.9 have skewed extremely negatively, and she's now one of the weaker champs in the game for both top lane and jungle. The nerfs honestly didn't seem that bad on paper, with Gwen losing some AP ratio on Q damage and her armor growth being reduced, but it's likely the Q nerf we underestimated. Since Gwen Q is on such a short cooldown at only 3.5 seconds base when you have it fully maxed out, losing AP ratio on the spell has really hurt her mid to late game strength. The max damage AP ratio went from 60 to 45%, so with just one Q usage, it's not a super big nerf, but if you're able to get 4 or 5 Qs off in an extended skirmish, which is quite likely a lot of the time, it now becomes a much more significant loss. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster for Gwen as of late, being an OP tier champ a few patches back, and now falling to one of the weakest picks as we're placing her in the top lane B tier. So for the top lane tier list, we finally have a new look to the OP tier for 25.9, with Shen and Set locking down the OP tier slots, while Kayle and Urgot are now down in S. If you've been following the pro scene lately, then you'd probably have seen Nidalee top pulled out and have had thoughts about playing it yourself in solo queue, but for the sake of everyone's LP, please don't. Nidalee top in solo queue quite literally has a 43% win rate, which is the lowest for any champion who has a play rate above 0.5%. You're basically just coin tossing the game when locking in Nidalee top, so if you care about your LP, it's a pick you should just enjoy watching the pros play while staying away for solo queue. The Boots of Swiftness changes are seeming to have turned out as just a slight nerf so far. In the pre-patch tier list, we showed you guys how with the passive change on Swift March to where you now gain adaptive damage instead of movement speed is actually a net buff gold efficiency wise. Of course, if you aren't able to get the Swift March upgrade because your team doesn't complete the Feats of Strength objective, then Swiftness boots are weaker due to the item losing 5 base movement speed, but overall the changes have not been enough to force the boots out of meta. So for the jungle meta in 25.9, we theorized in the pre-patch tier list that because of Grub's spawn timer being moved from 6 to 8 minutes, that we could see a rise in power for junglers who have strong level 6 spikes, but so far we're not seeing that. It's not looking like the Grub timer change has led to any meaningful shifts in meta, so the best junglers from last patch are still the best in 25.9. The Yorick nerf has turned out as expected, with the champion losing his OP tier standing. However, he is still being placed in the S tier and remains a really great pick for the lower elos. And then for Gwen, her nerfs were some of the most significant of the patch, with the champ losing a bit over 2% win rate. Nerfs have now dropped Gwen down quite a bit in priority, and she's no longer worth playing over any of the A and S tier options. Nefiri did get nerfed as well, but the changes landed much less harsh than the Gwen changes, and she remains in the A tier for 25.9. Annie has had some of the most drastic swings in power that we have ever seen over these past 2 patches. In 25.7, Annie was sitting around a very respectable 52% win rate, but then the adjustments came through in 25.8 and she fell off a cliff down to 47%. Well, in 25.9, with the buffs being issued, the pendulum has swung right back up, with Annie now holding down an even higher win rate than she had in 25.7, up at 53%. A 6% win rate boost due to the buffs this patch was definitely not our base case. We were more so expecting somewhere between a 2 to 3% spike, but 6% is just pretty wild. Annie's base damage on Q went up, her W mana cost got reduced, while her R was given more passive magic penetration. Nevertheless, Annie is now back to being a phenomenal solo queue pickup and is being bumped up into the mid lane OP tier for 25.9. When is the last time we had a champ in C tier in one patch and then immediately moved up into OP for the next patch? It's probably never happened, but Annie is the rare exception for 25.9. So with the Rod of Ages nerfs coming through for this patch, were we correct in our theory that the item would only be situationally good now on select mages? It's looking like it is the case, as Rod has lost over 1% win rate on Orianna, while Archangel's Rush is now winning about 3% more. So straight up autopilot buying Rod of Ages on Orianna, Victor, and Ahri is no longer a viable strategy. The main draw to Rod of Ages is the durability that it provides for you, so if you're playing into a comp who has a lot of burst threat, that's where the health can be really valuable for you. If you're playing into more consistent damage comps though, who lack burst, there's just less incentive to build Rod now with the item getting nerfed. So looking at the mid lane tier list, Annie moving up is the only more significant adjustment for mid patch. Orianna was one other mid laner who got buffed for 25.9, but as expected, the change did not increase her power level at all, and that was in part due to Rod of Ages being nerfed in the same patch. The Neferi nerfs have actually surprisingly not really done a whole lot. It's crazy to think that W cooldown was only 20 seconds on the mini rework release, and now it's up to 26 seconds, but even with that heavy of a nerf, she's still holding up really well. The Ignite buff is actually looking to be somewhat significant for a select few mid laners. It's from level 6 onwards to where Ignite deals more damage now, so mid lane champs who have a strong level 6 all-in are who seem to be benefiting the most. Zed and Fizz in specific have both seen their win rates spike up a bit for 25.9, and both champs have incredible all-in threat when they hit their 6. It was just Ashe and Kalista who were changed for ADC in 25.9, and their adjustments have landed as to how we expected, so there's no further movement for them on the tier list for mid-patch. So far, at least for solo queue, it's not looking like the grub timer changes are leading to any meaningful shift in power for any ADCs. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that we could potentially see a rise in power for ADCs with stronger early game skirmishes due to Dragon now spawning in 3 minutes earlier than grubs, but that hasn't been the case, at least to a significant degree. So that means we've still got Lucian, Jinx, and Tristana on top as the most optimal ADCs for solo queue. So there were two supports buffed for 25.9 being Leona and Morgana, and it's looking like the Leona buffs have turned out way more impactful. Now that Leona's passive duration is up to 2.5 seconds instead of 1.5 seconds, it just makes it way more reliable for her teammates to proc. There's almost no way that her ADC won't be able to follow up within 2.5 seconds of her engaging, whereas 1.5 seconds could have been a tad too short in certain instances before. So just way more consistency with Leona's passive has turned out huge, and mana cost going down on Q and E also allows her to have more threat if lanes do end up dragging out for a significant duration. Ignite buff is actually really nice for Leona as well, since she has one of the best level 6 all-ins for any support. And then on top of this, Unflinching got buffed this patch too, so there were honestly a lot of things trending in Leona's favor. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that we could potentially be moving Leona into S tier for the mid-patch tier list, and now that we've seen how impactful the changes have landed, she's getting that bump up. So we recently featured Nidalee support in our OP builds video for 25.9 and highlighted how she can be a really great pick in select spots. If you didn't see that video, a couple of the key takeaways are as follows. First is that E max is far superior to Q max on Nidalee support, so make sure you're getting that right. With E fully maxed on Nidalee, it's a 70% attack speed boost for 7 seconds, so you're providing your ADC with 1,750 gold worth of stats, which is just incredible. Now, with the nerf to Rod of Ages coming through for this patch, there is also an alternative setup that you can run that we didn't talk about in that OP builds video. It's a more supportive setup where you go Aerie for the Keystone rune, take Dreammaker for the item upgrade, grab Echoes of Helia as your rush item, and Moonstone second. Matchups will definitely dictate the strength of the different builds on Nidalee, as taking Grasp as your Keystone will work better when playing into a melee support, while Aerie is going to offer more value into double range. Straight up blind picking Nidalee support is going to be more risky, as you definitely want to know who your ADC is picking before you lock her in. Since so much of Nidalee support's power comes from being able to boost her ADC's attack speed with her E, playing with an ADC like Smolder, Ezreal, Jhin, Samira, or Neela, who can't really maximize the power from that attack speed, are who you'll want to avoid. An ADC like Tristana, Varus, Jinx, Vayne, or Ashe are who you'll synergize far greater with. So overall, Nidalee support is definitely a champ to consider picking up for 25.9 if you can pick it in those correct spots, so she's going to be added to the support tier list. So for the support tier list in 25.9, we have Fiddlesticks leading the way as the most OP support, while Braum and Sona are all also incredibly powerful. Other than Leona, Morgana was the other support adjusted for 25.9, but her buffs have turned out way less impactful than Leona's, so Morg is not getting a further push up the tier list. Something worth noting for Fiddle support, if you're looking to play him the most optimally, is the fact that heal is leading to far greater success than ignite, while Q max is winning way more than W. Most Fiddle support players are taking ignite, but heal has quite literally had a 5% better win rate than ignite over the past patch, which is very significant. A lot of Fiddle players are also still maxing their W out first, but you really want that Q max on Fiddle support so that you have the fear duration up from 1.25 to 2.25 seconds and percent health damage up as well. With how the meta build works on Fiddle support, where you rush Trailblazer, you're not playing him as a significant damage source. You're much more of a tanky engaged threat, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to max W out first when playing the build. We talked about Nidalee as an off-meta support who has been creeping into meta, and Annie support is in a similar spot right now. Play rate of Annie support has doubled over the past patch, and with the buffs coming through for 25.9, she's actually not a terrible pick. Definitely way better as a mid laner, but can slot in quite well as support if paired with the right kind of ADC. You want an ADC who has good follow-up burst power for when you land your stun, so picks like Miss Fortune, Jhin, Ashe, Caitlyn, and Tristana are the champs finding the most success with Annie. So if you're looking for some variety in your champion pool and enjoyed these off-meta picks, Annie, Fiddle, and Nidalee are all solid picks for this patch, with Fiddle obviously being the most powerful of the three. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit skillcapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, that is a complete look at the solo queue tier list for every single role as we reach the midway point of 25.9. Thank you all so much for watching, we'll see you back soon.